Hello and welcome to the Pinkbike podcast. We've got everyone in the same spot, or at least some of the Pinkbike crew, to talk about the end of year awards, as well as some of the tech innovations that we've witnessed in the past 12 months. Now, this being the podcast that we're also putting on YouTube now, everyone is going to, as a group, reference the camera once at the start. Hello, internet.
Hi, camera.
We're going to turn away and let people lock into their audio experience. Kaz, you've been reviewing bikes for 65 years.
Correct.
Has this been an interesting year for bike design?
Maybe, sort of ish. I mean, not as interesting as we've seen in the past. I think we've said it a bunch of times in other things, but it's kind of like the year of refinement, where it's more about like little small tweaks, little changes. There wasn't like one particular technology that just took off across the board. You know, there was a couple of years ago, it seemed like high pivots were everywhere. It was all about high pivots. And then this year, not as much. We did have some high pivot bikes, but yeah, it's more about like the little changes rather than some new magical technology.
Dario, this has been your first full calendar year at Pinkbike.
Yes, yeah.
How has it been? Have you got settled in? Has everyone been nice?
Job. Yeah, it's been wonderful. It's been cool to have like the full calendar progression of like, it feels like it was a busy year for me. I don't know if that's reflective of 2024 in the broader spectrum, but there was definitely a lot happening. Whether it was all new or not, we'll get into, but yeah, it was fun.
Dario just said a really important word there, enjoyment. We're very lucky that we get to do this, and it is a lot of fun. Have there been any particular standout enjoyment, either things you've covered, particular products, areas for you this year, Matt?
World Champs was definitely a highlight. It was cool going over there, getting to ride some of the local trails in Andorra, getting the show from those locals, a bunch of Commensal riders, and yeah, watching the race in person. Like the speed that those riders are going now, that's incredible. Crankworks, another standout for sure. Tons of riding, good people, awesome trails, and yeah, a bunch of other cool testing products. Well,
you did the stage race this year too, right? Or
I was trying to think what happened early on, but
it's been a long year. Yeah,
it was like the very beginning of the year, February or something.
Yeah. Spent most of March in New Zealand, and that's on my top 10 things of 2024 for sure.
Cool.
Maybe we'll go through, before we get into the nitty gritty of the hard hitting journalistic awards we'll be dishing out. Let's talk about some lighthearted stuff. Dario, what's something you really enjoyed from the last year? It's like Sunday
the World
morning
Cups
radio.
It's nice.
Are out there as well. I got to go to two. I went to Poland and to Leger, and they were so fun, so cool. It's just, it is not even worth saying at this point because it's been said so many times, but you appreciate the speed that they're carrying so much more in person, and just the precision that they all have as well is incredible. So that was super cool. Fun to see the whole like circus behind it as well.
Rampage?
Rampage was sick. Rampage was like a little more like upsetting, I think is the word. It's just like so nerve-wracking to spend the time there and watch everyone like guinea pig stuff and go through it. Max and I got really sunburnt and like had a nice time in the heat, but yeah, Rampage was sick. That is something that I like will not forget soon.
Do you think, at the time you were there, I remember you saying that seeing Ben Fairclough's line in person was absolutely
crazy.
insane.
It just didn't look done. Like so much of the stuff, you're like, how is this ready? And like there are elements of it, like some of the big features you understand, like that looks like a scaled up version of like crabapple hits or something like that. But it's like those weird raw in between bits were just hard to fathom. Yeah.
And how do you feel about someone that was actually there watching it in person now that we've seen other people? I think poach would be unfair, but ride the line.
It's there to ride if anyone wants to. I think
does it undermine either undermine the idea that he was unfairly scored, or perhaps just show that building guinea pigging is half the battle, right?
I think so. I think that's what it comes down to. Like it being like his run of that stuff being the first ever is what makes it really gnarly. And establishing it, I think the speed and commitment required is less than some of the other gigantic features out there, which makes it easier to do second or third. But some of those giant things, like you could watch the replay of Rampage 100 times and you still wouldn't feel confident rolling into it just because the speed is such an unknown. So I think that's maybe the difference.
Kaz, what's your loveliest thing from
Loveliest
2024.
thing. I mean, I'm gonna have to put the World Cups on there too, because I went to Mount St. Anne. That's the only World Cup I went to, but it was super fun. It was the final race of the year, and it was fall and just beautiful. Like the riding was really good too. I went to explore some places outside of like 45 minutes away from Mount St. Anne. I think it's Sentiers du Moulin. I'm probably definitely saying that wrong. But
I didn't know you spoke French.
I don't. Like, you can tell. So I don't know how you actually pronounce it, but that place is really cool. It's like almost a little bit like Squamish, but with a little bit of East Coast flair. And I was super impressed with what they have going on there. So it's great riding and also watching the race. It's like Menard's last race. Just kind of watching everything come together. So yeah, if anyone out there hasn't watched a World Cup race and you have a chance, I highly recommend it. It's worth it. You get to it's just easy. Even if I was just there as a regular spectator, not working for Pinkbike, it's pretty close access. Like you can get really close to the riding action.
It's great. Like I didn't have a media vest for the Poland race, so I was just there as a spectator essentially. And the way it's taped, like I was 10 feet from the action in spots.
Yeah, same. Like I didn't have the media bit for the rock garden, and we were able to get like right up there. So that's super cool. So that was really fun. Obviously, Crankworks is great. I did crash super hard at the beginning of Crankworks, so my memories aren't as like.
Yeah, I didn't have a great Crankworks.
I bent a pedal, like the pedal bent so much that my foot was like this.
Oh yeah,
it was like early on, but I was able to ride the whole thing. I had to get like an ultrasound to make sure I wasn't pregnant, and like it was a whole thing. So, but it was still fun. But otherwise, just like riding at home, the trails around right now in Bellingham and up here in Squamish and the North Shore and stuff are super good. And XC riding, I had a lot of fun riding XC bikes this year. Like just kind of embraced the, especially in the middle of summer. I think that sketchy tires and tiny bikes are really fun.
Yeah, totally. Well, isn't that nice?
It was yours. It was yours.
What about more?
Let's hear.
I think Crankworks is fun, but for me, I live like a nun for 51 weeks a year, and then I cash in all my chips at Crankworks. So we have very different experiences, but that was lots of fun.
What's the name of that? Like Rumspringer or something? Isn't that?
Rumspringer is like, the Amish or Mennonite. You go into real society for a little bit.
That's what I did
experience.
Yeah. That was probably, I mean, for me, the main highlight was probably actually had an amazing interior BC road trip.
Oh yeah, you did.
With two friends who, basically my two closest friends, one lives in New Zealand, one lives in the UK. They'd never met, but we just committed, and they got on like a house on fire, and we had the most fun. And then downhill bike field test was super cool.
Yeah.
I know there are a lot of times where, we say we do get to really enjoy it, but there's some things you enjoy even more than others, and that felt like a massive privilege, having like these amazing bikes and just smashing laps. I remember because it was that really wet early part of the season, but the park was running.
Yeah.
So when we were doing that fork test as well, and it was
it was nice,
insane. I was actually going up sometimes with friends, and then they'd ride a bike and then we'd swap at midday, just to sort of, and then at the end of the day we'd go for a pint and just talk. And as like a bike nerd, that was so sick.
pretty dream setup.
Yeah. Well, away from the wholesome, nice bits, and onto the bits that industry aficionados will be complaining about behind the scenes for the next 12 months about why their bike was overlooked or their product not given a fair cop. So we've got a couple of different categories, and I'll read through them now. We've got value product of the year, value bike of the year, e-bike of the year, innovation of the year, suspension product of the year, product of the year, and mountain bike of the year. And we're going to go through them in that order. We will probably, there's like a 90% chance I'm going to put chapters in for the YouTube video. But if it's not there, that's because that's just how I roll. That's how I do things. But I will endeavour to put them in. Let's just get into it. So for value product of the year, there have been, let's have a look. So 6 nominations. So we have the SRAM Maven Bronze Brakes. We have the PNW Range Dropper Post. We have the Reserve Wheels with the DEG Hub. We have the Fair Bicycle Drop Best, the Silt Enduro Wheel Set, and the Abus High Drop. Lots and lots of things to go through. We're going to maybe go. So let's start with the Maven Bronze. Super interesting brake. The Bronze is maybe, as we'll kind of get onto, it feels like it's the standout of the range, but it's also the entry-level brake. I haven't actually spent that much time on the Mavens. I've ridden actually the Bronzes. I think I've had a go on one of your bikes, which had some more adjustment on it. What makes the Bronze stand out? Who wants it?
They're cheap relative to the range. So like the Ultimates are $300 a wheel. The Bronze, I think, is $189 USD a wheel. And they have the exact same power. The only thing they lack is the little scroll wheel for the contact adjust. But functionally, they're pretty much identical. The lever is a slightly different
it's like stamped versus
make out. It's stamped aluminum versus forged aluminum. So like maybe some people will notice a stiffness difference, but realistically, like the strength is identical. So,
and then going on to the PNW range dropper post. Did anyone here review that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been on that. I put it, I rode a couple of bikes. I think I ended up on that top fuel towards the end just because I wanted a 200 mil drop post. And yeah, it works like a post should. Just up, down, easy. Works with their lever. Like there's nothing really stand out about it, but that's kind of what's nice. I think it's $200 retail. Like it's fairly inexpensive for a dropper post, and it's, it's not the shortest on the market, but it's not crazy long. It's not crazy heavy. It's like everything that you would want if you just want to get a dropper post and then put it on and not to think about it. So
cheapest but the best.
Yeah, exactly. Like some dropper posts, you look at the retail price and they're so expensive.
Crazy.
But this one it's a nice upgrade for someone that doesn't have one or wants more drop. So
this is also the year of like the electronic dropper post.
Yeah, and I don't
Bloom,
need,
and they're
I don't need more
3 times
batteries.
that cost.
I don't need $800 dropper. So that was nice. It's a good good dropper post.
The next nomination, some reserve wheels, Santa Cruz, their sort of wheel manufacturer. In value product of the year, have we got our spreadsheet wrong? Have we put it in the wrong line?
These ones are made of aluminum, so they're less expensive.
Aluminum?
And they have a lifetime warranty.
Yep.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And you get the DEG hub, which as far as I know, they're the first company. I think they might have had like a little, initially they're the only ones that can use that DEG hub on these wheels. So that one has the 4 degrees. It's a 90 tooth ratchet ring. So it gives you 4 degrees between engagement points. So it's a quick engaging hub. And the price stayed the same compared to what they were the last time. So I think we probably nominated them for value product last year too, but now they just improved the hub. And so they're still on there because they're a great buy for that price. It's actually a high end wheel set technically for like a nice aluminum wheel set with a good hub and a reasonable-ish price. Like we should say that value is not the same as being cheap. Like I don't want to say that a $700 wheel set's affordable or, not.
But a $700 wheel set with a lifetime warranty.
Yeah.
And crash
you can definitely
replacement
make
is
the
like
argument for
a
that.
significantly better value.
And they've held up well. Like I had them on an e-bike and a regular bike and just same rims as before, but they're pretty good.
Then rattling through, we've got the Fair Bicycle Drop Best. That's called an aftermarket tweak, I suppose, the geometry, right? Well, not geometry, but a useful adjustment to
You can
geometry.
say the geometry because it pushes your seat forward a few inches via a like clamp modifier. Have anyone here tried
I think Jesse May had it.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, basically it makes an old bike or a bike with a slack effective seat tube angle much more modern, putting it more upright. Totally changes bike. So if you have, a great bike aside from that, this is a great way to fix it.
Well, you know what immediately springs to mind? It was the Specialized Enduro.
Yeah.
Oh,
Long,
yeah.
effective top tube and a bit slack in the seat tube. It's basically that slight tweak of it's becoming it's still a great bike, but maybe maximizing it. Next, we have the Silt Enduro wheel set, which I reviewed. Again, alloy wheels. I think it's about $400 US. You basically get, if you break a rim, you get the first one free, then you have crash replacement for life. I think 50% off. Honestly, just a good functional wheel, relatively cheap, that you could put on any level of bike and it be good, which I thought was pretty decent. And then the last one is the ABUS high drop full face helmet. They're downhill certified.
Yep.
And what I'd be saying. What was the go with that one, Matt? They look pretty good, hey?
Yeah, just like pretty straightforward lines, nothing crazy, too angular, too round. It's just a normal looking helmet. It has some unique foam properties inside. It's also a little bit more durable, resistant to like small dents and cracks, or so they say. I never put it to the test, thankfully. But just like a great, safe helmet for $200, which is a insane price tag.
It's like half or a third of the price of a fancier carbon one. So nobody, you shouldn't skimp on your head safety, but it's nice to have a product that you don't have to spend so much money. It still keeps you safe. So.
Yeah.
Mega. So the winner of the value product of the year is
the
the PNW range dropper post. Like I said, it sounds like it's almost like a good post that happens to be good value rather than an all out value proposition. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, just like an easy one to recommend. Someone wants something that works, no fuss, use a simple cartridge in there. So just like a nice, you get the value because it should last you for multiple seasons, and it's a good, worthy upgrade.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, on to the next category, the value bike of the year. Now, we actually did a value bike field test this year, which is always a fun time because I get to stay in the warm, dry and Squamish while you guys come up.
Ride hardtails
in the rain, and then I just come and say, "Oh, how was it, guys?" Yeah, it was really good. And I just laugh at you as you're looking like drowned rats. So we've got a couple of nominations here. We've got the Marin Alpine Trail, the YT Jeffsy, the Stump Jumper Alloy. Also in that category, maybe worth mentioning that specialize in doing some cool alloy bikes in other places. The Chisel is sort of an honorable mention here. The Boss Nut from Caliber. There's the Airdrop Edit. And, we're seeing all of these bikes are actually really bloody good, hey?
Yeah.
Starting with the Marin Alpine Trail. Again, I think this was a bike that Jesse May Morgan had. Marin seemed to be sort of nipping at the heels of that like hardcore aluminium platform for years now. And it seems
This
like
bike seems cool.
yeah. Seems like they're doing some really cool stuff. It feels like I know I've always got a soft spot for Marin.
Yeah, they're doing great. And I think this one's super adjustable, so you can tweak it however you want, which is nice, especially for a value bike. As whether you're riding changes or you just move to a different zone or just want to really like fine tune it, it's cool to have all those features on a bike that doesn't cost an insane amount. And I think the build kit it's a really good bike. Like you could anybody of any level could buy it and go rally.
Yeah.
There was also the YT Jeffsy. This is sort of constant, almost seems like quite a good base, maybe more for a European audience, but one of the real baselines of what they expect all bikes to be compared to now.
Yeah.
Was this bike that we featured in the...
Yeah, so we had it in the value field test. We had the Core 2, and then I reviewed the Core 4, which is the carbon frame model. I'd say this is one of those special bikes that like any tier is a good value for what you're getting. YT does like an almost unbelievably good job at offering value for the builds to a degree that like I don't understand how they're offering what they have as a build kit when other companies seem to not be able to. But yeah, that Core 2 I think was kind of the universal favorite in the value field test as far as like most capable bike went. And then the Jeffsy I reviewed, the carbon frame one, was great. Like just good at most things. Like
the price like sub $4,000.
I don't remember off the top of my head, but I want to say it's in that ballpark. Yeah,
like a very, very reasonable price for what you're getting.
But we had that with the downhill field test as well.
Yeah,
with their
platform, the 2S.
The 2S it was so like I think it was 6,000 for the top line flagship build, and some of the other bikes were like 10.
Yeah. It's just like you even go through the math of like cost of parts. Like you couldn't buy.
It's funny you say that. When I did that orange review, I was looking at the models trying to work out the review, and I came to the conclusion it was best to buy a frame and buy a YT. So that's what I put to checks. I was like, swap the parts over and then sell the YT frame if you're really
if you're that committed to that chassis. Yeah, it feels that way. Like the Jeffsy was that way for sure. It was like the Core 4 I rode was like all ultimate suspension, nice frame, like good, like nothing I would change. Like genuinely all the parts were what I ran the whole time, and that's pretty rare.
Next we have the Stump Jumper Alloy, which is actually a bike that we all rode in this year's trail bike field test. I saw a great comment. Assertive trail bike.
Assertive trail bike.
Yeah. It's a great subcategory. In the assertive bike category, the Stump Jumper really, really shone. I mean, that bike was going blow for blow, and not just, it wasn't a caveat, this bike, considering
for the price.
It's cheap.
No.
It was genuinely a very, very well-rounded bike.
For sure.
Dario, again, you had the fun task of reviewing the carbon and the alloy bike.
Yeah.
We've done so much. We spoke about the Stump Jumper so recently and so much on the podcast in various ways. But can you just service that conversation a little bit about regards to riding the alloy version of the bike compared to the carbon version, and where you land on it as someone that rides a 65-pound solid aluminium?
Yeah, compared to my personal tank, the primary difference just comes down to frame weight. Maybe the only difference, if you're looking at kinematic and geometry and all that stuff, there's like maybe minor differences in the feel of the chassis, but then that depends a lot on the build kit as well. So I'd say they did a really good job of capturing all of the benefits of their design in the cheaper aluminum package without any deficit beyond frame weight. And that frame weight is quite high. Like we commented on that in the field test. It's like a 9-pound frame relative, like versus the carbon, which is like sub 4, I think. So
cool.
Big difference, but
you can run a cable actuated derailleur.
You can run a cable actuated
derailleur. You can't do that in the carbon.
How much weight is because of those two?
The holes. The 3-pound holes.
I was going to say a kilo each hole. Which, we, as a control, we can't dismiss that.
But I mean, it's that bike performed really well against a lot of things that were significantly more expensive. So deserves a place on the list.
Speaking of, taking it to the more expensive bike, we've got the last two nominations out of the UK. The first one is a bike that actually came out a little later in the year, and so it sort of got a nomination because of what we know about the previous version, as well as seeing the
Also, the
geometry
price
sheet.
is just insane.
Yeah, the Caliber Boss Nut.
Yeah.
The first one, arguably, I think, in the UK, these things were huge, and with good reason. And it is great to see them come back to the table with another platform. I'd love to actually swing a leg over one myself.
Is Seb riding one?
I think Sim's got one, or he's getting one soon. Yeah.
Cool.
Such a, I don't know, it seems like a great platform.
Yeah.
And it's 1,500 pounds, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote it up the other day and I couldn't believe it. I was like, I gotta check that this is the right price.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like, for reference, that's like a frame price for most companies, or like cheaper than a frame price by margin. It's impressive.
But it's got, I think, especially for, I suppose the first one came out probably 2018 or 2019, and they really nailed their colours to the mast in terms of aggressive, suitable geometry. They were like, this idea that beginners should somehow, there's any level of logic to being like, well, you are a beginner, so you do want bad geometry.
Right?
Like,
It's
you're
like
going to
you're
be
more
more
scared all the time.
Yeah.
It's like, those skills you haven't developed yet? Well, they need to be exposed. It's crazy to me. I mean, maybe that does serve as a quick conversation. Do you think there is anything to be said for, I think when progressive geometry really started kicking off, there was this idea of, I don't know, that it wasn't suitable for all riders, or maybe, do you think that's kind of gone away?
I don't think it is. Yeah, I hope that's gone away. I think that I don't think that maybe there's like a little bit of where your top pros have a little bit more, they change their frame size or things to really maximize it for themselves. But I think overall, a beginner should be able to ride the same geometry as a pro, basically.
Yeah.
Like a slacker head angle is not going to make you
Better,
like, or a steeper head angle, sorry, because that's what we used to see. And basically it was carryover frames. It still had the shorter and steeper geo, but now that it's changed, it's kind of nice where I don't think there's like a beginner geometry versus a pro geometry.
This is, I think, maybe a broader conversation that would be worth having, but it almost feels like a bell curve where beginner rider, let's just use like head angle as an example, because you can get way into the weeds, but like a 64-degree head angle is perfect for a beginner. You can do just about any trail. It handles predictably and normally. It works. At the peak of the bell curve is where you're like, we need this crazy slack bike. I can't ride steep trails if I don't have this like 61-degree head angle. And then you get to the other side of the bell curve and you're back at 64 being like great for pretty much everything. And I think there's something to that. Like, if you just stick to the more typical thing, it tends to work pretty well everywhere. Like, there's a reason a lot of companies are settling around certain geometry figures. And that applies to the beginning as well as the end.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. I think as well as the argument around what is suitable, like, beginner to advanced geometry has actually changed, because I think some of the most suitable beginner geometry is the stuff that was labelled as advanced only a couple of years ago. And what I mean by that is the short rear end, the slack high front. It puts a lot of bike in front of you, in a very, like, almost quite a numb way when you really want to push, but it makes a very safe bike. And it's funny, it shows how sort of watered down the argument is that's the thing that at one point we're saying would only be ridden by this style of rider, and now it's kind of flipped. On to the last nomination, which is again out of the UK, the Airdrop Edit. So this was a bike that's been around in a couple of different guises over the years. They were resolutely no 29 in any capacity, front or rear, for a while, and they've softened and mellowed, and this is a mixed wheel bike that comes in a very nice British racing green, but it's also very good value. I mean, like, it feels like when it comes to no nonsense, UK has got some good, there's the privateer as well, coming out. Again, this was reviewed in the UK by Jesse. It's a shame we couldn't fly over here for this podcast. But yeah, good value. Really great to see them tick on. Anyone else have any notes or anything about this bike, this mixed wheel 4-bar bike? Go on.
I mean,
It looks good.
Specifically the mixed wheel, but your friends at Vertigo, there was 2 or 3 of them riding the full 27.5 bikes and didn't slow them down. Holy shit, they were rallying those bikes. And one trail bike to do it all. They were riding it in the bike park and couldn't say enough good things. It was just a solid frame. So if they carry that on and just add the mixed wheel up front, might open up a larger consumer market there for options.
What I really like, and like it in all brands, and Airdropper seems to have got it right, is they make the bikes they want to ride. And they're maybe not, they're still quite a small brand. They're just they don't have to maybe justify it to a committee. They're just like, this is what we want to do, and no one else likes it. Well, we'll worry about that later, which I actually find very easy to admire. It's a high risk, high reward strategy, but sometimes it pays off.
If it works.
And the winner of the value bike of the year was the Marin Alpine Trail. Like I said, a hyper adjustable bike, lots of things going on there, sensible spec, and kind of good for any level.
Exactly.
Onto the e-bike of the year, which has the nominations of the Trek / Plus, the Cannondale Motera SL, the Score 6080Z, Jesus Christ, the Amflow, the Orbea Rise, the Da Vinci E-Troy, and the Santa Cruz Valor. That's a lot of e-bikes.
A lot of e-bikes.
Jeez Louise.
Yeah,
it was a busy year for e-bikes, yeah.
Do you think the e-bike thing is... I know,
you think it's going to stick around?
Well, I mean, I know. Do you think it is going to be it seems to be, it's treated kind of as like the golden goose in the bike industry. It's going to continually grow forever and ever.
Yeah.
But surely it's got...
I don't think so.
It is not going to grow forever. I hope this is I hope this isn't a message to any person at a bike company who's like considering their 5-year plan, but like everything slows down at a certain point. This will too.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of development still happening, but...
Yeah, and they still have their limits. Like, to be classed as a mountain bike or an e-mountain bike, they're limited in terms of output. Weight is obviously a consideration. They're limited by what battery cells are being produced by the biggest battery manufacturers. So yeah, there will be developments. I'm sure they'll get quieter and more integrated and cleaner and all that stuff, which is great. But there's definitely some ceiling there.
Yeah, I'm still not buying into one day there'll be no more regular mountain bikes and we'll all just be on e-bikes. I'm still not convinced. So hopefully it doesn't change. Like, it's great that e-bikes are there. They're fine. They're fun. We review them. They're a good time, but it's also really great to ride the bikes without motors. So I just think of it as like, I don't really
make a Formula One comparison.
No, there's no Formula One comparison here at all.
Back when we had Fred Flintstone in Formula One, where you just held a chassis and ran around a circle. Those were the good old days.
I think I've said it before, but people still run on purpose.
Yeah, that's a good point.
There's technologies where you don't have to run, but people choose to do that. So I think there'll always be people choosing to ride a bike without a motor, and there'll be people that choose to ride one with a motor or both. Yeah,
I still haven't gotten the exoskeleton yet, but
I'm working on that. We might be done with everything. No bike. We'll just be in exoskeletons, like zipping around.
Yeah,
but there were some good e-bikes this year.
Well, yeah, I mean, it feels like we've sort of this feels like it's maybe been the year of the lightweight e-bike. It feels like, a couple of these ones here are noteworthy, not so much because of the reasons that you'd think you'd ride a mountain bike, i.e. the descending performance or for a whole different, or the geometry, but actually it's like, that's a really well packaged bike that's very quiet, and it's almost it's that halfway house.
Yeah, we're getting closer to that ideal. Like, I think the ideal bike for, most of us here, probably ideal e-bike would be pretty light and in that 40-ish pound range, but then with a full power motor and a good battery capacity, which isn't, no one's quite cracked the code, but they're getting closer. As one of these nominees was real close to it. So.
Totally. I mean, well, let's get into them. So we've got the Trek / Plus. Now, this is probably, I think, the closest to my mind, at least I can think of, that any bike brand has ever got to really having two bikes in their range that are the non-electric version and the electric version.
They're, almost identical.
Yeah, almost identical.
Yep.
Now, the Trek / actually won Bike of the Year
last year.
Yeah. I mean, what an amazing platform that was. Does that translate when you stick a battery in the down tube?
I think it's better downhill. I think it is.
Dario, wash your mouth out.
I'm sorry. I know. So I spent a ton of last year on the Slash. I have spent a ton of time on the Slash Plus. The extra few pounds you get from the battery.
I just had to correct my incredulous look. I was literally there like, I'm sorry, I am listening.
It's just so I like, as someone who thinks that like a little bit of extra chassis weight can help a bike descend better. That is the case here. The one caveat is Trek does a narrower size range for their e-bikes than they do for their pedal bikes. So the gap in sizing is a lot bigger on the Slash Plus, meaning I don't think the Geo is quite as perfect for me, but it will suit a lot of people. That Slash just had like whatever the XL or T5, whatever sizing convention they use. It was like bang on. And this is
bang off.
Yeah, but the suspension feel, like I rode this.
insane.
Definitely the best feeling e-bike or maybe any mountain bike as far as like overall suspension. Like when you get in rough, chopped up stuff, it's just like super calm, and you just can plow.
If your goal is like erasure, it's really good at that. It's crazy.
It's pretty sweet. I was impressed, and that was with It's
I'm actually getting a bit interested.
Yeah, no, it's pretty cool.
Well, I think that's the thing. I remember when we did that 2021 field test in Sun Peaks. We did those e-bikes.
Oh yeah.
And I remember just thinking, the charm of a bicycle, descending it is it's like a swallow. It's light. It's dynamic. It can move. And those e-bikes were like wrapping a house brick to that swallow, and the characteristic quickly becomes it falls out the sky quickly.
I will say that like you're not we should move through the list because there's a couple of these that'll fit this bill, but like the lightweight e-bikes are closer to that lightweight trail bike or even enduro bike feel, but they're not the same. Like there is still some heft to them that's, even if like I'm comparing the Slash Plus and my frameworks, which are like only a couple pounds different in weight, there's like some character that's different between the two. Okay,
well, let's start getting through them. There is next onto the Cannondale, which you
I rode that one.
Yes.
Yeah, Seb reviewed it, or full review, but I rode that one over in Portugal.
Yeah.
And they like it's an SL bike, but not really an SL bike, where they gave it a full power motor and a decent battery capacity. They just kind of picked some parts spec and made the frame lighter. So you can have it all the power that you want, but then doesn't feel quite as big and bulky as other ones.
Feels like Cannondale and sort of reining back the quirky bit. We had that habit last year, which I really enjoyed. Would that be true of this?
Yeah, they did go, the one quirk that they did, they made it pretty slack. I think it's a 62-degree head angle, which it is adjustable, so you can kind of steepen it up, and you can also put dual 29-inch wheels. Right. Yeah, it's pretty slack, which is fun in the really steep stuff, but it can definitely feel a little odd in flatter terrain.
Do you find that when riding e-bikes, especially the full-powered ones, that they, and this is just, I'm not the most experienced e-bike, but this is my thing, was you need a slacker head angle under heavy braking, because when it's steeper, the heavy weight of the downshift feels like it wants to pivot around.
Yeah, I mean, you are getting more like mass shifting forward. So I think there's something to that, but 62 might be a little too far.
It's a bit rich for me, but it's quite slack.
But yeah, like the motor worked. Trying to think what standout features of it. Yeah, they just kind of like the package that they created is definitely a good example of like a modern e-bike that isn't that crazy big, super heavy thing, but still can get you on some big, long adventures.
Well, onto another bike. This one has a name that just rolls off the tongue. The Score 6080Z. Now, it might sound like something which was sent back from the future to save humanity from its AI self, but what is this bike, and how does the naming convention work? So that's a 160, 180 bike?
No, I don't.
60 pounds, 80 pounds?
60 is actually close to the weight. It's 57 pounds.
Oh my God.
It's made of all the metal.
But the best part is it does not ride like that.
That's sick.
It rides light, which is, it's kind of mind boggling. Not sure exactly where the 60 comes from yet, but the 80 refers to 180 mils of rear travel, and it has a 190 mil single crown Zeb fork up front.
That's a lot of bike.
Yeah, it's also quite slack. It's
what's the battery size? Like 800?
750.
750, okay.
Yeah, but it's very secure. It's a very quiet bike. Excellent plush progressive suspension, and just like the right curve feels amazing. And it's basically a downhill bike that you can pedal with an e-bike motor attached, so you can just rally downhill laps. It's pretty proper.
I thought that was going to be the like pinnacle of e-bikes. When they were like maybe 4 years ago, it felt like that was what we were heading towards, was like a pedalable downhill bike. And then that segment disappeared for a bit. This maybe is like a new example of heading in that direction again, but it seems like a lot of brands focused on that like mid-travel or lightweight as their like main development path.
Can I say something which will upset people?
Yes.
I think that what we thought the e-biker was going to be isn't what it was. I think that when e-bikes first started coming out, it was like, this is going to be for people who want to replace like this sort of thing, replace a shuttle vehicle, have something to smash laps. And then they've realized maybe there's elements of people, it's actually maybe more catered towards the beginner.
Yeah.
You know?
And I'd say like that's shaken out.
Yeah.
It seems like just anecdotally, it seems to be the case.
Yeah. People like want a mountain bike sometimes, but don't have the time or motivation to do it, as they're like,
or people that, that have time constraints where it's hard for them to sort of maintain a level of fitness that makes mountain biking fun. As they come to it when they can just get out, and they actually don't want to have every ride being like the first ride back after.
Yeah. And lots of people don't have gnarly mountains in their backyard. Like you can make as many downhill bikes as you make, you still need to have hills to ride down. So
well, let's not get into whether a cross-country bike is therefore the answer and stick to it.
There's some XCE bikes out there, which I don't think is the answer, but
yeah. There are a few, I think there are lots of ways I learned to temper my snobbery, and I'm trying to become more chilled out.
Yeah.
But lightweight XCE bikes, I think are daft.
Yeah, I agree. Fully agree.
Yeah. Anyway, onto a bike that has set hearts ablaze on the internet and caused quite a stir with the industry, the Amflow.
Oh, yeah.
Now, we're going to get onto this in a little bit because, you know, a bit of foreshadowing, this does come up for another nomination. Mm-hmm. But there are two different things we need to separate out here. The bike and the technology.
Yeah.
Right.
As the bike, it's very worthy of a nomination, absolutely. What Matt, you've been spending some fair amount of time on this. Mm-hmm. What is this bike like to ride, and why has it sort of left a couple of people in the industry scratching their heads?
Well, basically, the frame is very similar to a stump jumper. That same kind of layout looks very similar. And then DJI's motor is lightweight, pretty efficient in some modes, and extremely powerful with a lot of torque. So basically, if you try and ride with another full-powered e-bike and they're both on turbo, you just get dropped. It's like off the line. It's like a Tesla versus like any other combustion engine vehicle. It's insane how different this bike is to pedal.
And that not only in terms of the level of just sheer torque that comes out of that motor, but in terms of it feels like that, is it the boost mode, which is like 30 seconds only?
Yeah.
I think because
like
you reach adrenal fatigue of just uphill
it just comes at you.
Yeah, to give you some quick numbers, most full-powered e-bikes are around 80 to 90 newton meters of torque, and then this one is 105 to begin with, but then it has 120 for this 30-second boost. So like off the line, you're just flying in that turbo mode.
What are the Rockies? Like 110?
105.
105?
Or
Okay.
maybe a little higher.
And like those historically were like,
Yeah.
like you'd feel like you're peeling back a little bit on the bike. That's crazy. Yeah. Cool.
And well, let's talk about the bike itself then, and maybe we'll get into the motor a little bit later on. Is this just a stump jumper? It looks a bit like a stump jumper. They did a few tweaks, but
it quacks like a stump jumper and walks like a stump jumper.
It's pretty close. I mean, yeah, maybe Specialized sort of set a benchmark, and Amflow recognized that, and we're like, that's a good frame. We're going to model it off of that. Obviously, that layout offers a lot of benefits. You know, with the water bottle being able to fit inside, you can throw adjustments. It gives you like a good C-tube angle, good shock placement for easy to work with, leverage ratios, all that stuff. So yeah, it just kind of fits the bill for like a middle of the road, mid-travel e-bike, and it's going to work for a lot of people.
And it's light as well.
Yes.
Yeah, and we should clarify that Amflow is the model of the bike, and then DJI is the company making the bike.
Is it? Okay, I was getting a little bit lost.
DJI is also making the motor, and we'll get into this when we talk about the motor. But in the future, it wouldn't be surprising to see other companies use that motor in their bike. Yeah. So this is almost as if Bosch made a bike, basically, or if
it's
Shimano
a showcase of their technology.
Yeah.
In a way.
Well, I thought for the first good while it was called Amp-Flow. Like amps were flowing.
Yeah.
But hey. Onto the next bike, the Orbea Rise. Mm-hmm. Ooh, today
I've ridden that, and Jesse May's ridden it too. Yeah, it's another example of a lighter weight e-bike that this one rides very naturally. Like it feels closer to your regular mountain bike experience, except you're going way faster. So you know, if you are descending or you need to bunny hop or something, it doesn't feel like you're just going to throw your back out going to make some moves.
What motor does it use?
This one uses the Shimano motor that they kind of tuned, so it has like I don't remember the Newton meters off the top of my head, but it does give you more power than the previous ones did. But it's a nice, like, kind of middle ground for it's kind of like your exploring e-bike. You know, it's not just for smashing out the rowdiest stuff, but it can do that. But it's just nice because it is pretty quiet while climbing. It's a little rattly downhill still, a little bit like a clutch noise, but definitely an impressive little thing. Like, yeah, just the weight itself is very impressive for the range.
Then who is currently winning Motor Wars? You know, because it felt like there was a time where it goes through, like, if it's got this motor, it's
Matt's doing a big old group test.
Yeah, we've got that coming for sure.
Okay, should we maybe...
We won't go too deep into it, but I mean...
Bosch has been the one that's been talked about, like, on the internet. That's what most people
we just saw that huge release of Bosch bikes. Yeah. Like, that's why it felt like Pinkbike was, like, only e-bikes for that week was
Yeah.
Bosch released a new motor, and every brand seems to have jumped on that.
Yeah.
Not actually every brand, but many did.
Yeah.
I've got one of their blenders, They're
So
so
they make dishwashers too, I
it's
think.
well put together. Honestly, man, it gets through dates like hot knife through butter. This thing's pretty nice.
Yeah, but we do have that motor roundup where we'll go in depth more.
Yeah.
But the new Bosch motor is nice. And I think we're going to get to the Santa Cruz, which has that. But
Well, let's get on to this. Let's roll into Santa Cruz.
Yeah.
It's okay. So it's a 4-bar Santa Cruz.
Sure is.
Holy Michael, the internet couldn't cope.
Couldn't cope.
Is it? Can you talk to their reasoning? Because it's e-bikes, but also the bike is important as well.
For sure. So Santa Cruz's reasoning for going with a horse link on the Vala was due to e-bike constraints. So the Bosch motor requires a certain fitment, and that was conflicting with where they would have put the pivot points to get the kinematic they wanted with VPP. So they built it with a horse link that gets the same kinematic. That's their logic. I think it makes sense. It also has really good seat post insertion. Like I can slam a 240 on the XL that I'm riding. It rides really well. I think whatever reasoning aside, it's just a good bike. I think that's kind of how I've been thinking about it this whole time. Like it has some Santa Cruziness to it, but ultimately it's just like, it's a good full power e-bike that handles really nicely.
Okay. Next, we go on to the final nomination, the Da Vinci E-Troy Light, Canadian-made bike reviewed by Sarah Moore. She certainly liked it.
Yeah, she thought it was great.
Can you give us a skinny on what this bike is?
I mean, you mentioned that the Canadian-made, that's great to see. The price isn't, it's not an exorbitant price. Aluminum frame, and it has the Bosch SX motor, which is kind of that middle ground. It's not they call it their lightweight motor, but it's not crazy light. So it still gives you enough power that you feel like you're getting some assistance rather than just being fit, basically. But the bike still retains like a good level of maneuverability. And even for being aluminum, it doesn't kind of, something like that score, the numbers don't really, on paper, it might look a little bigger and heavier than you expect, but on a trail, really nice and maneuverable.
Okay.
And can still handle some rowdy stuff. So, yeah.
So the winner of this year's e-bike of the year is the Trek /Plus. It sounds like, Dario, you were very, very, very impressed.
I like this bike a lot. Yeah.
I like this bike a lot.
I rode it yesterday. It was great.
Yeah.
I rode it many days before that as well, but it's fresh in the head. I think we didn't talk about the numbers when we were giving the preface on it, but what Trek did here is they used a fairly large battery. I think it's a 580 watt hour battery with a fairly low torque motor. It's the TQ system. It's dead silent. Like you can hear it if you're in like the perfect little fern gully that's like a empty soundless space. You can kind of hear some noise out of the motor, but for all practical purposes, it's silent. It's silent on the descents as well, which is sweet. Apropos what you were just saying about the E-Troy Light and the SX motor, I feel like the TQ is the sensation of being really, really fit. It's not like boosty by any means. Like you can get that if you like spin really high cadence, but for the most part, it's just a higher range, higher speed experience.
It feels like they're really going down the organic feeling.
Yeah,
for sure.
It feels like you're having your best
that.
day ever on the bike. Like if you've been training forever and everything is like super smooth, and
Yep.
instead of rather someone just like yanking you up the hill, which you get with that DJI motor, which I mean, I think
Or even the new Bosch stuff. It's
like if other manufacturers do adopt that DJI motor, like I wouldn't be surprised if next year the bike of the year has that motor. If, I don't know what other companies are coming out with, but at the moment, and we'll get into it when we go into innovations of the year, but
which is
there's
next.
there's something to be said. But for this year, the bike that really stood out, I think that Trek Slash did something
It
special.
also just it's a well-rounded package beyond being like good at the e-bike things. It's as you mentioned, it's a bike that performs really well. I've ridden quite a bit on it with friends who are on full power bikes, and if I'm like ruining myself, I can keep up. Though it's definitely not for that. So I think that's the big caveat here. Is it's like the lightweight e-bikes get into a tricky space of how they fit into a e-bike dynamic, and it can hang if you're fit and willing to push really hard, but only then.
I think this is your enduro bike replacement, as hard as it is to say that, but you are someone riding a bike that you said it's only 2 pounds different. Like why,
Right.
if given the choice,
Like most build weights for the Slash Plus are going to be in the like high 40s if you're putting real tires on it. That's like part of the way Trek gets the weight down is they use like fairly light wheels. that are Bontrager, and their tires are a little lighter as well. So if you're running like durable carbon or alloy wheels and beefy tires, it'll be like high 40s, but it's pretty good.
Yeah.
That seems like quite a lot. High 40s.
Quite a lot of weight.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not light. I'm not saying that. Like, it still feels like I had to carry it for a bit yesterday, and just due to personal decisions, not due to the bike, but
You're tired of riding it. Just put it back.
it's not like, you're not like
bike of
convinced
the
it's a
year.
trail bike.
I carried it 15 kilometers yesterday. It was my Frodo. It was my Mandu.
No, it's cool.
Yeah,
I don't
it's
know.
cool.
It's like
It's good. Yeah,
Super
it's
cool.
worth
Well,
riding
hey.
and enjoying.
Well, let's get on to innovation of the year then. And we've got some actually really interesting pieces here, which I'm very excited to talk about. So, first up, we have the Schwalbe radial tyre line, which is our whole revamp to their range with some interesting technology in the sidewall. We have the DJI motor, which is sort of, a cat amongst the pigeons for the established e-bike order, I think, within the bike industry, which is really, really great. The Genie Shock from Specialized, which appeared on the Stump Jumper alloy, we've already mentioned. The Lapierre Spicy, just because of, well, we're going to get into this bike. I think it's a really cool bike, and it seemingly covers off a lot of bases. We had the E13 Sidekick hub, which set hearts aflutter on the World Cup circuit as everyone tried to wonder how the hell it even works. And then we have the Countercycle, again, World Cup level tech, which isn't a shake weight. It is a shake weight. It isn't a shake weight.
It's
It's not made by shake weight, but it uses similar shake weight technology.
Okay, so using shake weight technology, which is all about maximizing, or dare I say, taking the limiter off what your suspension setup potentially in terms of how it can track the ground. Starting with the Schwalbe radial tires. Now we've all ridden these quite a bit. Dario, you had the review come out on the
Shredder.
The Shredder.
Yeah.
Matt, we did a bit of testing, which we don't want to kind of reveal too much because we're still working on it.
Yeah. I also did the first review on the Gravity
yes.
Alberts. Yeah.
It feels, this is quite big for Schwalbe. They were certainly very excited about it.
Yeah.
And it's, I think, how to put this? I think what I've perceived as the editorial comment over the years is that Schwalbe's construction's really good. They have some novel or interesting features, but largely when it comes to small bump tracking or maybe slow speed tracking, they're a really good tire to brutalize riding dry, hard stuff, and the really well made, but maybe not always the grippiest or the most supple. Didn't that be fair to say, guys?
Yeah, and I think their rubber compounds historically, like even their super soft rubber hasn't been the actual super softest rubber compared to other manufacturers, but I think with the radial that kind of changes. Like you're no longer, to go over the basics, basically they just change the casing so that the way that the threads are oriented, it allows it to kind of contour to the ground a little bit better. And I think that you're less reliant on having the absolute grippiest rubber because the tire is kind of like hooking onto the ground. So
massive contact patch relative to
and it does work.
traditional.
Like it's they did sponsor the field test, so we should mention that. But besides that, we've all ridden them individually, and it's pretty ridiculous, especially here where it's really wet at this time of year. Like it's changed my opinion of some of the Schwalbe's tires that historically I haven't been a fan of in the past. Like I've been riding Magic Marys recently with the radial casing, and I love that tire now. And when the normal casing, I was like, it's not that great.
Yeah. So for full disclosure again, towards the end of this year, in the past couple of weeks, I've left the tech department and now working just primarily in video, doing partnership content, and I have done an explaining video about how the radial tech works, which will be probably out by now. Maybe it's coming out in coming days. So without commenting too much on the performance, I would say it feels very different to their standard casing.
For sure.
Yeah.
But I'll leave you guys to do that.
Yeah, it's different than almost like anything out there. Like I've been on rides with buddies that are on regular tires, and I'll be riding, and it just doesn't make it feel slippery, which is kind of a crazy thing to say, but it's a very dramatic, noticeable difference where you can just hold your line and you're on it, and it's great. Well,
the way I sort of think about how it works is, if you have say if you had a fork that had loads of compression damping, at a certain point, it doesn't matter how much compression damping you have. If your air spring is too soft and you hit something really hard, you're going to bottom out. That's sort of the corner that some tires have found themselves in with traditional casing. This is about actually tuning that relationship. So understanding how much compression damping you want, and then having a higher air spring with almost like a light. They
achieve a ride feel that I didn't know I would like.
Yes, I would agree with that.
It's interesting. And I came into them quite skeptical, like especially with the field test. I was, you're like, okay, we're going to do 2 weeks on all these different bikes on tires that I'd ridden the gravity casing, but not the trail. And with the trail casing, I was even more skeptical just because it's like a lighter construction of an already very supple feeling tire relative to what we're used to. But like the testament is in the fact that we didn't have any flats aside from Matt.
That was a rim
killing a wheel.
Yeah.
And like well outside the use case of a normal bike, but like they work really well. I like continue to use them, continue to be surprised. I'm excited to go back into the dry season with them as well, because I feel like we got a bit of a tail end of that in use, and they've been really impressive in the wet, but I'm curious to see how pressures change and all that come summer again.
It's almost like the difference between a coil shock and an air shock. Like the difference in feel, it's kind of that feeling, like they both work well, but then you do get that coil, especially when you're looking for traction, it just kind of like sucks things up. So I think that's why I've been loving it now.
When I joined Pinkbike, you and Levy were in a fight to the death over the hand stamp and its suitability.
I do not like the Hans Dampf, even any.
It's probably worth noting that they did not bring the Hans Dampf into the radial family. But they may. You never know.
Who knows? But
I think it's interesting because that's sort of when I think about your general feeling towards Schwalbe tires.
Yeah, like I've always been like,
journey.
just it's personal preference. I should say that they do make great tires. I've the Big Betty I like before this, but now it's kind of changed because it does open up some of those tires where I previously did not get along with them that well, but now that they're actually behaving differently, they feel great. Like I go back to that Magic Mary, but that's right now my favorite tire in the wet.
Oh, super cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, on to the next one. We already spoke about it, but the DJI motor. This has actually been an interesting, a bit of a tidbit. We've got one at Matt's been reviewing a Pinkbike, and the amount of people in the industry, other brands, that have reached out and said, "Hey, can I borrow that?" I need to see what it's about. That kind of says it all. That it feels like it's going to be an OE spec on other brands.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's I think why they made this, right? Is to like showcase the technology. It's hard to break into that market at this point, I would think, because it requires you to build the entire bike around it. It's not like a fork. It's not this universal fitment. It has constraints that you have to plan for. And so I think DJI is trying to get that interest drummed up, and they seem to be doing a good job of that.
They're a multi-billion-dollar company, so I think for them, they're able to, not everyone could pull it off, but they kind of seem like they came out of nowhere. Like all of a sudden, like, hey, we have an e-bike and a motor, and really? And then you try it, and, oh, actually, you did it.
Well, Max, our filmer and video producer,
and friend,
the guy on his phone over here listening to the podcast. The guy's so gripped by the conversation, he's not even looking up.
I mean, he often comes in with these anecdotal phrases, and just made this perfect suggestion. He's like, well, DJI has been making drones have to be light, they have to be reliable, they have to fly, so yeah, of course they're going to build like a good e-bike motor. That's what they've started.
I hope they make
a
drone that I can fly in.
Yeah.
Oh, man,
skip the e-bike so I can fly around. Like that would be cool.
I'm sure they've got some scary R&D department where they're working on it.
I don't want to know.
I want to go to that press camp.
But it's also got some of the I suppose whether it be gyroscopes from drones within the technology.
Have self-balancing technology.
Not quite, but it's got some interesting things. You can have like auto power mode. And I think it's very,
got a touch
very
screen.
innovative. Man,
that's
touch
something.
screen. Yeah.
Does it work with gloves, or do you have to use your nose?
No, it does work with gloves. How'd you get a black eye? Oh, stem.
Crack your forehead on your stem.
Wearing pipe lining on your stem just to stop your head burning. Well, next got onto the Genie Shock. Like I said, featured on the Specialized. Now, Dario, is this optimization, or is this sort of remedying a Specialized?
Hold on.
It's actually Matt's allergic to the Genie stuff. He's brought him up in.
He's got really emotional.
Okay, throw it away.
The small bump.
I think you could argue for a positive case or a negative case of why this exists. Like anything, you can have like the cynical take being in this case that like they designed a bike with an unusually linear kinematic and built a shock that caters to that really well. I think you could also say they built a bike and a shock that maximize a certain band of downhill performance and does a good job of that.
Well, let me pose a secondary question then. As a mountain bike community and as a consumer base, are we just a bit too sensitive to the idea of proprietary tech? This shock isn't proprietary. You could put a different...
Correct.
But if you're buying a $10,000 mountain bike, for instance, does it need to have a shock that's the same to go on a different bike? Or should it be about
because they're
maximizing
not
the riding
anyway.
experience?
Like they're tuned to that bike for the most
Yeah, I
part.
don't
Like
think
it's rare that you get a bike with a shock, and that shock could just swap onto another bike and work the exact same as one that was.
That's, I mean, do you see what I mean? Is there
Yeah,
a
I
degree of
think
sensitivity
the issue
in
that
to
happens
base?
is if it's historical, like historically, things that are proprietary haven't worked as well. Like you see a lot of companies have done, not just Specialized, but other larger brands have come out with like, we made this magic shock with Formula One technology, and then
There
they
we
don't
go,
use
Kaz.
it
Tell me
anymore.
What is this Formula One you speak
I
of?
don't know. I've never heard of it, but then
Or
that shock-
NASCAR technology.
NASCAR technology, yeah. So you see that, and then all of a sudden they're back to the normal
NASCAR
shock.
technology is just your handlebars being off center.
You only turn left.
It's a knock block that doesn't turn past 0 degrees to the right.
Yeah. Coming soon. So I think there's,
It's like an April Fool's.
yeah. So there is that like a little bit of skepticism when you see something proprietary, but this isn't actually proprietary. This shock could go on other bikes if you want it to, which we'll probably end up testing it on the other bike just to see. But I think it's the innovative part is how the shock works and like the way that they achieved what they did to make a bike that allows you to have this level of adjustability and have that kind of like almost impossible to bottom out, but you can still have it nice and soft off the top.
Yeah, I wrote this category up, and to me, I think that the reason for inclusion of this shock isn't like that the Stump Jumper is this like paradigm shifting bicycle. It's a good bike, works well. It's not drastically different from the last, but the technology in the shock, like the 2-stage air spring, the novelty of that allows for some potentially really interesting things down the line. Like Specialized in their patent for this makes mention of usage in a fork. I think that's a cool avenue of exploration. Just the idea that you can have this massive air volume that allows for easy and low resistance travel with a safety bumper in that 2nd-stage air spring is very interesting. Like what we'll see out of it, I don't know.
I was going to say, I think this would be actually really well used on a whole host of other bikes. And a word you just said there, or a phrase you just said, that was 2-stage. To give an idea to, people at home, the brands have gone to such lengths before to try and incorporate this level of adjustability that there was a bike called the 2-stage, which literally had 2 shocks on.
Yeah, there you go.
Because it is the sort of holy grail, and the fact that you can get that in one shock is impressive, and it's very innovative. Let's go on next then to a bike, speaking of adjustment, the Lapierre Spicy, and particularly here we're talking about, I suppose, we're waiting on this bike to come in for review, but we're actually talking about some of the adjustment and almost like industrial design around this bike. Dario, can you speak to a bit of that?
It's an impressive packaging problem for sure. So the Spicy is a long travel enduro bike that can be a typical pivot design, like it's a horse link, right? Or it can be a high pivot horse link, all within the same frame, same hardware, with just an idler that you bolt on with a different pivot position. So it's integration of fundamentally 2 different suspension systems, I suppose you could say, in one frame that also has all the other geometry adjustment that you'd expect of an adjustable bike. So, and
also you saw it being raced, to great acclaim by Isabelle Couderier, but also saw it being raced at the World Cups. It was at Fort William. Yeah. And I think there's going to be some more aftermarket stuff coming because there were some braces being run on the downhill bike.
Yep.
Not to, I guess, adjust the stiffness across the shock.
Right. Yeah, I saw one at Leger with like a different rocker link, I think. That was maybe allowing for more travel, had a dual crown. But it seems like they built a platform that allows for a wider range of utility than we've seen before.
Yeah, there's not too many bikes where you can actually like change the full suspension design. It's usually like little tweaks. This is a massive one. They should call it like the trendsetter. You just pick which trend is going. Like I would like maybe high pivot today, or like so. I mean, hopefully we get it in soon-ish to review because it'd be cool to see the difference. Like, which does it make sense to be switching your suspension design regularly?
Is this going to be putting out sort of a job though, Kaz? How many times did we have on the Enduro field test, for instance? Oh, that high pivot was really good because of this.
Yeah.
And then all the bikes could be high pivots or not. Or
now they can just, everything's going to be so adjustable. Like you can make it, there's no way to say it's bad if you put in all the adjustments.
It can be everything. There's always, but my curiosity with this bike is usually there's a compromise. I wonder where it is here, or if there is one. I think that's
C-tube insertions.
Well, that is, for sure. Yeah, I would say as they succeeded in the overall packaging department, the C-tube insertion is comical on this bike.
Yeah. But made for a downhill bike would be sweet.
Yeah.
Even though it's not a downhill bike.
Yeah.
But hey,
yeah.
moving on. Next, we have the E13 Sidekick. We've seen a lot of, clever devices. It feels prompted by the idler revolution a couple of years ago to try and sort of detach or suspend drivetrain inputs into suspension, or should I say vice versa. A couple of systems like the O-chain, I think, is really novel. We've seen things like, which are maybe kind of coming up good again, like the STFU system, which are about controlling chain slap and the whipping effect on the chain. This E13 Sidekick system seems to nip those problems in the bud by before they can get outside where the problem starts. I suppose in the internals of the freer body, they are detached. The idea being it's got 3 different positions, so you can have a varying amount of slack before the drivetrain engages. So that could give you a punchier feel if you want something snappier, or it could have something that will go deeper into the travel before it engages the drivetrain. Dario, you've been riding this system. Talk us through the innovation.
Yeah, so I think the standout with this, as you mentioned, like there are a lot of chain devices on the market now. The Sidekick strikes me as maybe the most elegant solution to the problem yet, because it doesn't add complication to, say, the chainring, which most of the other devices are that. It's the O-chain or the Rimpact are a chainring with a lot of extra moving parts. This is just a hub. It does have that pusher, they call it. That's another internal mechanism in the hub, but there's no service life on that. I have not found it to add any durability issues or complication yet. I'm going to continue riding it for a further out long-term durability test, but it has adjustment, as you mentioned. And their goal with that adjustment range is you'll always be able to clock it to a point where you have more slack in the system than your bike's kinematic would take up, if that makes sense. So like you want to overcompensate with slack so that it feels like your bike has no chain through the extent of travel. But if you did for some reason want to curtail that a little bit, you could.
Well, I think it's really interesting to see, it felt like this had a real uptake on the World Cup circuit, which is very interesting. I also think you see some riders or teams going, idler, maybe an O-chain, maybe like just to try and stop any whipping, because these tracks are getting so fast and so rough. It feels, to my mind, that some of these products really shine when you're going really fast, especially on rough bike park sections. Have you guys had a similar experience with that?
Yeah. I mean, the chain, when you're riding at that speed, just the amount that it moves and hits the frame, like there are very few bikes that eliminate it totally, but the more gadgets or things you can put on the bike to reduce that, the more it removes that sensation from your mind and the more you can focus on going fast.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of gadgets, we have the counter cycle. Can someone explain, without using Formula One?
I can, yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's see how you go, Kaz. What is this? I believe it might have precedence in motorsport, but talk us through how that'd be relevant to mountain bike.
More on motorcycles have used it too. But basically it's a suspended weight. So it's almost like a picture of a can with a spring in there, and then the weight, it's just designed to help balance out the forces of the bike. So kind of like it is a stabilizer. So as you're going down the same rough stuff we were talking about that's making the chain slap around, it's just trying to kind of keep your bike feeling glued to the ground and kind of balance out that any
as the force rebounding, it's going the other way.
Yeah.
And you tune the spring weight to match the resonance of your suspension
and we've
cycling.
seen them put them in different spots for like varying degrees of success. Most of them this year we saw were mounted up on the front on the fork, just because trying to get that front end stable again with these super rough tracks. If your hands aren't bouncing around, you can focus on going forward and go fast. So we're seeing, Countercycle is the main, that's the one who got the innovation of the year, but they developed it for motorsports initially, and they're kind of like the first to the party in the mountain bike world. We got some testing on the way to kind of see how it works and if the average rider is going to find it useful. But we definitely saw a lot of high-level World Cup racers experimenting with it this year. It's kind of this and the O-chain were the two things we saw the most of in the downhill world as being like the technology everybody wanted. And same with the Sidekick too.
Yeah.
Just trying to, basically try to keep the bikes calm and keep the chain from slapping around and keep the front end just tracking well.
I want to see people start strapping the countercycles to the body.
Yeah, like a vest
like
with a bunch of like bouncy things.
A bowling ball in a backpack's a good idea. Right?
Yeah.
And maybe like 2 air cushions above and below.
Yeah,
Just tuning. Okay, well, winner of the innovation of the year is the E13 Sidekick Hub. Enormously popular. It's been tested for a long time on the World Cup circuit. So enormously popular on the World Cup, sorry, it seems like.
Right. Well, they had development partnerships with a couple different teams, and as a result saw, I think, iteration and refinement through those programs. But the end result is really impressive. Like, you and I had a chance to test it like in an intensive period, doing some back-to-back stuff, like going through all the different tuning options in the bike park, on pedal trails. And as I've continued riding it, it continues to impress. We're going to work on a full roundup of all these different chain devices and really see how they perform differently and like what they achieve in terms of like stability and noise and maybe even suspension feel. But I think all in all, what impresses me about the Sidekick is that elegance of design. Like it's just integrating it into a really small package with no extra faff, and so far service has been
and you just put it on your bike.
Issue.
Like it's just a wheel, which is nice. You don't have to deal with taking stuff apart. You put a wheel on and your bike might have a dramatically different ride feel.
Yeah. Well, so on to suspension product of the year. And this year we have the Fox Grip X2, the Push SV8 shock, Fox Neo's electronic system, the Vivid coil, and the Vorsprung Telum.
Telum.
It is Telum. Fuck, I thought it was
I'll
Telum.
tell them what.
Yeah, well, this is it.
Tell 'em.
This is it. So, first nomination, the Fox Grip X2. This year also saw the release of the Charger 3.1. The 3.1 was sort of like an update. The Grip X2 was an architecturally different damper. We also saw, not to go too much of a tangent, there's also the Grip X family, which sort of, to align with the rear shocks now, the X2 being the gravity platform. Why was the Grip X2 nominated, Kaz?
It kind of builds on what was already a good platform. The previous Grip 2 damper was I'd say a favorite among one of our favorite dampers. And then this one takes that, gives you a wider range of adjustments. So it should work better for a wider range of riders. Just works very well. Like there's not, trying to say the standout feature is just that it works, which is, that might seem like faint praise, but it's really nice. It's noticeable. You know, I'd already been a fan of the Grip 2 damper, was able to find my happy spot, but with this one, it feels even better. So I think, and then you can get more, you can get less or more damping, which again, if you're a lighter rider or more aggressive rider, what you're trying to search for, it's nice not need to get a retune. But if you do need it retuned, it's fairly easy to swap out some shims and kind of really customize the damper to make your fork feel exactly the way you want. Yeah,
it feels like they've gone really heavy this year into what they refer to as pressure balancing, which is, I suppose, trying to reduce lag within the system by having a different, I think it's a different preload on that mid valve. And so subsequently you can get something which can run loads of damping if you want to just keep on turning like a tap. And
it continues working. Like in the initial testing was just like adding more and more and more and more. And it takes a long time until you get to a point where it starts to feel bad. Bad is even like maybe the wrong term.
Well, this is what I was going to say. I thought it was really interesting because sometimes when you have forks that have a lot of damping available, you get to a point that it goes off a cliff edge and the fork just turns off. Almost it just becomes
like you hit a wall of like, oh, that's crazy hard.
But this seems to be limited when you get almost closed by your comfort and your desire to go really hard more than it is about finding grip, if that makes sense.
Right.
And if you're up for it, you can run it with loads of damping but you just got to really want it. Appeared on a lot of bikes. I say we really liked it a lot of time in the 38. That's probably the time we rode it most, but we also had it in that downhill field test.
Yeah, it was on a few of those forks.
And I have it on a 36 and I'm going to put one in a 34. And it's also retrofittable to the prior chassis or the current chassis. It's just a slide-in damper.
Well, this is what I'd love to touch upon. We traditionally, the editorial comment upon the Grip 2 was one of, we liked it, as a general trend. I think we're all quite happy with it. However, if ever we do I expect that when we talk about this, there'll be some people reading comments or even writing comments saying that the Grip 2 was really hard to set up. It never really worked. Where do you think that comes from? Do you think it's maybe misunderstanding or putting an unfair expectation on what a damper should do?
Yeah.
I mean, it did a lot of the things similarly. I think what the Grip 2 lacked that the Grip X2 does well is building high-speed compression. And I'd say the biggest like feel difference to me between the two, when you've found a good setup, is what I'm describing is like the transition between compression and rebound. Feels like a round, smooth thing on the X2. Even at really high speeds, it doesn't get into any sort of like busy feeling. It's just always like moving through travel in a smooth way, where the Grip 2, you can get it tuned to have a bit more like busyness there. But that's a subtle difference. Like, I don't think it's like some massive.
Yeah, like Grip 2 is good. So, but I mean, maybe if people were struggling with setup, and maybe if they were finding themselves more at the outer ranges of the, like the range of outer edges of the range of adjustment, I think this one should help address that. So whether you're a lighter rider or heavy rider, I think that the broader range just makes it more, it's just more tuning options.
Well, speaking of tuning options, let's go on to a company known for their many tuning options. Push, the SV8 shock. Kaz, you had this on your bike on your Madonna at points, I think.
Yeah.
Can you talk us through it?
Yeah, so basically it's almost a simpler version of the shock that they've had in the past. Before, they'd have a shock that allowed you to switch between two separate damping circuits. So you could almost have it like two fully different setups. And this one's kind of like your more traditional shock with just one damping circuit that goes through. But yeah, it works very, very well. Like the tune that they've arrived on feels great. Good range of adjustments. You get your high and low speed compression and all that. But it's one of those shocks that's a fairly expensive, but not as expensive as their highest end shock. But if you're the consumer looking for something a little bit different, kind of want that like upgrade, this is a genuine upgrade, I would say, for most people. At least in my case, when putting it on, I was like, this shock has the feel that I'm looking for, and felt better than I tested against almost all of the kind of like mainstream shocks on the market, and I really liked how this one felt. So yeah,
I wanted to throw in an honorable mention under this for the fast suspension ride E, which is a principally similar shock. Like, it's the less complicated coil shock where there's a flagship model available. That one has no adjustment aside from rebound and a climb switch, and I really liked it as well. So cool boutique products that aren't too complicated.
Yeah, is that one made in France, the Fast?
Yep.
Yeah, and this one's made in the USA. So
nice. Super cool. Onto the Fox Neo. This one maybe is the antithesis to that sort of thinking.
Yeah.
Although maybe then again it's meant to just adjust on the fly to suit your riding. This electronic system, it's sort of Fox's, how to put this, it feels like Fox, their live valve thing, how it was applied, especially gravity bikes, was sometimes a bit contrived. It felt like there was a lot of wires. This seems like a real neater solution.
Yep.
Dario, can you talk us through it?
Yeah, so I did the first thoughts on this, and I've been riding it since. And Neo is the naming convention's a bit confusing. Neo is like the wireless protocol that they're using in their seat post and the shock. It's just a very fast wireless communication technique. It's still the live valve shock. The algorithm is slightly different and is now tunable to your preferences in terms of how it responds to bumps. But functionally what it is a really fast lockout that toggles open and closed depending on the terrain and the pitch of the bike and the bumps that you're hitting. And it does that really well. You know, if your goal is to have a bike that's locked out more than not on the climbs especially, then this achieves that. I think it is like, I know it's the first pass in what will probably be an evolving approach. But again, kind of like the Sidekick, it's just there's an elegance to the design here that I think is impressive and worth, giving kudos to.
And are we, this is a suspension product of the year. I mean, some of this is quite interesting because we could put a lot of these shocks on a whole variety of different bikes, some that have better performing suspension platforms than others. Is the Neo similar in that regard? Will there be better homes for it than others?
I think there are. Like, I spoke to this in my first impressions. I rode it on a few different bikes, but found that it benefited some more than others, specifically those with, like, say, a slacker seat tube angle where you wished the bike was holding your weight up a bit better. For those like myself who like a steeper seat tube angle or a more like upright climbing position, that can be gained by using a lockout switch, but you don't always want to use that, especially on like technical sections. And so this kind of balances that relationship. I don't know that electronics in suspension are going to be this like massive wave of development. I think it's continuing to seem like a niche thing, but it's an impressive tech nonetheless.
But they've kind of got to do it. If you're a suspension manufacturer and you're big one,
Feels like
you've kind
it.
of got to.
I guess it feels like, I don't know why though.
I don't know why.
I don't
know.
like,
Big battery. Big batteries in on it somehow.
Big batteries.
they're small
big
batteries.
little batteries.
They're making their big batteries and cutting them so they're smaller,
Yeah.
but somehow.
I think my like vouch for this as an inclusion is it disappears pretty effectively when you want it
What, in
to.
terms of Allen keys just straight off the bike?
Leave your bike on the parking lot, you come back 2 hours.
Yeah, no, like it can, when it's working its best, which it doesn't always, and I mentioned that in the write-up. You can refer to that for like all my little nitty-gritty thoughts, but like when it's set up at its best, it does a really good job of just like being passive. And I think that's kind of the goal.
Okay. Well, on to the Vivid coil. The Vivid line has seen a real shake-up over the last couple of years. Seems to be re-established. There was a time where the Super Deluxe was really, the downhill shock. Now it's kind of moved away. The Vivid Air last year, the Vivid coil this year. Who's had it? Who's been running it?
I've been running.
We've all-
Yeah, have you been
we've
running
all
it?
had a go on it. I had it on that Kanga Rabbit. That crazy
Oh yeah,
True
that was a
VO
cool
suspension
bike.
bike. Yeah.
What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I was very impressed with that shock. It has the hydraulic bottom out. It just felt burlier than some of the other coil shocks I'd ridden. I mean, obviously that was tuned for that bike. I just spent 1 day on it, but it worked very pleasantly.
Yeah, it's super quiet too. Like I've also had it on the raw. It's got a bunch of time on that. But yeah, in addition to the hydraulic bottom out, just the overall sound, there's no noise.
Because you don't like any.
No, I just want things to be quiet. Like,
See, I don't mind suspension noise,
no,
but
everything. Shh. But especially top out is one thing I really don't like. I don't actually mind a little bit of rear suspension squish noise. I can deal, but like I hate.
You brave soldier.
Yeah, I know. I'd sacrifice for performance, but I really don't like how a lot of coil shocks, even high end ones, have that top out knock. If you're loading off a jump or something in the air, you just feel like dunk. Like I don't really like that sensation, and this doesn't have that, which is cool. It's like so it's quiet and no top out noises, and good range of adjustments.
Yeah,
It's not the
super
lightest, but it's
meaningful.
it's a good solid shot.
It's burly. Yeah.
And
Sorry, Dario, off you go.
I was like the one other like integral tech to the Vivid is that touchdown. Like the top 10% of travel has no compression damping, which means it like really settles into travel nicely on like chattery stuff. And I'm seeing you squint at me in skepticism, but I know that sounds weird principally. Like I think people were like, oh, but that's where I generate a lot of speed. I think you're like, you settle into compression nicely.
Yeah.
Like I was impressed by that. Like it takes the nose off the travel without feeling like you then like hit something and it doesn't give that sensation. So
Yeah. Okay. I haven't actually ridden this.
have you
shock.
ridden it?
No.
Oh.
But I just have not particularly nuanced feelings about, putting so much effort into the leverage ratio of bikes. And then sometimes we put so much effort into all the adjustment, and maybe not so much with coil shocks to be fair, but in terms of tuning the end and the front and the end, the start and the end stroke. And then sometimes you, especially with an air shock, then you throw in an air spring, and it sometimes feels like we could do with a few less cooks in the kitchen. Thank you very
For
much.
sure. I mean, you
If
look
we've
at
got
like
a
all
good
the
air
different
spring,
areas that are affected by different things.
It's
It
just
gets
like, I just want to
complicated.
reach full travel once.
Yeah.
Please.
That's what I was going to say about when you mentioned the air shock. I wasn't surprised, or I thought it was really cool how they developed that touchdown for the Vivid Air, but I was surprised when they continued that on with the coil.
Yes,
little
totally.
bit, yeah.
And it's only my skepticism. I mean, I might be completely wrong, but it feels like hydraulic bottom out on a coil makes sense. Hydraulic bottom out on an air shock, I don't always actually, feel.
But on an air shock that's like
think
doing
it makes
its
sense.
best to feel like a coil shock, I think it can start to make sense.
Yeah. It's nice you don't have to crack it open to put spacers in. Like you can just increase the.
Well, and I think
And you
I
don't
know.
get that crazy stored energy of a high ramp
Yeah.
I just have never
with the HBO.
ridden it on a bike that I wanted it on. I've always been like, well, I genuinely feel this would be a better bike. Like I would have it completely open.
What about a stump jumper?
What's that?
What about on a stump jumper? When you want some
so
hydraulic bottom out?
so I rode DHX and Vivid.
I would love to try it, maybe.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Yeah.
I had it on that Polar.
bike.
We had it on the Transition, and I always put me in this really no man's land between not getting full travel, or then I was leaving it fully open. I just wanted. I thought the progressive enough. Thank you very much. But then again, I am a loon, and I always have different setups. So hey, I'm just playing devil's avocado. Next, we are on. We talk about suspension product of the year. Fox Neo, Fox Grip X2 are doing a strong showing, don't get me wrong, but 3 of these are just coil shocks.
Yeah. Turns out.
Talk us through the Vorsprung Tullum. You know, they've been on a tuning company for years, a service center for years, and now they're sort of saying we're going to come to the party in terms of delivering a whole shock. I wonder if, you know, Fox and Burnaby will be saying, hey, bring your Vorsprung shocks here.
Yeah.
Or vice versa.
Yes, they finally done it. They made a whole suspension component instead of just whole aftermarket things. They're kind of aiming at that higher end market, or maybe the more demanding, or someone that has not special needs, that's the wrong term, but specific needs. Yeah, like wants something they might not be able to achieve from their normal kind of off the shelf shock. And even the setup process, or the actual purchasing process of this shock, you send them your details, like your height, your weight, your riding style, and then they kind of get back to you.
10-second video, right?
Maybe that's part. I didn't do that, but maybe they watch some field test videos.
Well, they have a lot of videos of us riding, so they didn't need to ask for
but it is like a kind of a more like back and forth of them.
Quite tailored.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
kind of like bespoke, is that a word? Yeah, like it's kind of like a tailored shock, which is cool, because the idea, their goal is that the shock shows up, you bolt it on your bike, and you just go ride. Like if they all worked right, that you shouldn't have to turn any dials for that first ride, which is kind of nice. And I did it, and it worked well. Like it wasn't even now. I've ridden it, a handful more times. I've maybe turned a couple little clicks, but nothing crazy. So out of the box, it puts you in that nice sweet spot to begin with, which you'd hope for the price.
Well, totally. But it's funny. We talked about that conversation earlier about some people maybe not being overly impressed with the grip too. At least there's a vocal. I don't want to stir them up too much, but I would say it's a vocal minority personally. But this would, undermine that by giving them something straight out of the box that is making the most of those adjustments.
And then it has other adjustments, like they call it their revalve system, which basically lets you could retype in everything on their site and kind of calculate a new setting and then tune it to whether it's a new bike, or say your riding style changed, or you gained or lost a big amount of weight or something like that. So it allows you to retune it essentially without swapping shims. It kind of changes the pivot point for where the shims are flexing over. So it has some clever technology in there, made in cam loops for the most part. So yeah, pretty neat.
Yeah, amazing stuff. So the winner of Suspension Product of the Year is none of the coil shocks. It is the Fox Grip X2. It feels like across the board we were all really impressed with this
It works really well.
I think you spoke to Dario how much you could just keep turning it up, and the range of adjustment it gives riders.
I think it's going to be good for a lot of riders too. Like if you're buying a new bike and it comes on it, that's a good feature to be looking for on your bike. If you're weighing that versus another one like the X2, it can benefit a wide range of the riding population.
Okay. Well, let's get into product of the year. And the nominations are the Schwalbe radial tires, the NV M9 Pro rims, the One-Up V3 Post, the Magura Gustav Pro, and the O-Chain R. We spoke about these radial tires before, so I think we might just kind of hop and skip through them. Onto the NV M9 Pro rims. Matt, this came on one particular field test bike for the downhill.
Yeah.
And we went through a couple of wheels in that field test.
We definitely did.
These ones, Carbon MVs.
Damn.
Hot dog.
Yeah.
Talk us through.
Well, I had to vouch for these in this nominee category because, we just absolutely pounded the crap out of those. And I was genuinely impressed. Like, we barely touched a spoke to keep these true and rang them down Whistler a few times. No flats as well. So that's something to be said there. And given all that strength and tech to ward off flats, they aren't brutally harsh either. They're, very comfortable wheels, even on a stiffer bike, as you would say.
Yep.
And then Dario, you rode the trail version?
Yeah, I rode the M6, and I'm going to get a set of M9s for a trail bike at some point.
Yeah.
Because that's what's cool about these, is they're not just a downhill wheel. They have different hub specs.
Mm-hmm.
It's worth noting, when I went and did a tour of their factory, they did a destruction test on the M5, which is like the XC race wheel. And to get it to fail, we were reaching like terrifying heights of drop test, and it still never flatted like an XC tire. So I can believe that like you guys didn't run into flat issues.
Yeah.
It was impressive. Like, I think they knew that their last generation of stuff wasn't quite competing when it came to some of these metrics.
Well, they also had some very high profile failures.
They did.
Which I think probably is a boutique brand that sort of, they had those golden years with Santa Cruz. And I think they established really good, a really good name for themselves.
Yeah.
And then that thing at Snowshoe, I think probably really hurt them as a brand.
Yeah. Like whether that was, I don't know, like I don't really know much behind that, but like ultimately it sounds like they've done a good job of like reinventing the wheel, if you will. And
Nice.
and,
they did
the
make
stuff
the
works really
nipples externally adjustable now.
They
That was like
an award. I don't know if it's what do you get if it's like something you should have done a while ago.
oh yeah,
It's like an award, but not.
The hindsight award.
The hindsight award, yeah. Like it's really, it makes it more user serviceable, which is great.
yeah.
Okay, well that's great to see. Then we're on to the One-Up V3 post. It's probably something we've all spent a bit of time on.
Mm-hmm.
It's a seat post.
It's a seat
Yeah.
post.
it's a seat post, but it's long.
It's long.
But then it's short inside.
Yeah, long
Yeah.
and
well,
short.
let's
Good
talk to me like
dimensions.
I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
How is that possible? What is it? Why do we like it?
Well, it's long up top,
Okay, we
and
got
then
that
it's
far.
really short below. No, they've done a good job of packaging the internals in a way that does all the function that you want out of the seat post without too much sacrifice. I think bushing overlap is something that like can be a really challenging thing to package on droppers, and that, for reference, is like what to some degree facilitates the durability of a post and like how well it slides up and down for its lifespan. One-Up seems to have done a really good job of balancing that with this.
Well, also it's about how much of the sort of total length. It's the total length compared to travel.
Yeah,
You know,
Yeah, exactly.
and
Because
how you
it's
can
always
get the
going to be
best
this
ratio
long
between
above
the
it,
two.
and it has to be that long below to lower
Yeah,
it. But then, like your head, the clamping area has to be kind of low, and same with the bottom part of it to keep it as short as possible. This one's pretty short for most, like across the board. It's one of the shortest ones that you can get.
Pretty short, pretty light, pretty
Also
durable,
pretty light, yeah.
easy to work on.
Yeah, just a cartridge now that is recyclable.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And you don't have to check the air. It's just like set.
And when you go to 240mm drop post, it's hard to go. Like we always sound daft because it's like, this bike has only got 180mm dropper, and we sound, and everyone rolls their eyes because that was the holy grail even a couple of years ago.
Yep.
But once you go to a 240 with a super long insertion depth, it is, pretty nice.
It's a game changer.
Yeah.
It's just
240 is
gone.
too long for me though. I found my limit.
Really?
Yeah, it's like
I'm
feels
running
weird.
242.
But you're a lot taller than me.
Yeah.
This little guy.
Yeah.
Little guy.
It's a tiny 5'11".
Okay, well then let's go on to the Magura Gustav Pro. Now the Gustav Pro is a break from yesteryear, and Magura have brought it back. So they had the MT7,
Still do.
which they still do, and they really like the power of, but they wanted to make sort of the most consistent brake possible. So it's quite large oil volume, 2.5 mil thick rotors, really stiff everything.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's got, interestingly enough, it's got a really cool, I think it's their quick link system,
Yeah.
where basically it basically means your connector can be the same diameter as the hose. So should you want to be feeding it through a frame or a headset, in she goes, out she goes, no worries.
No bleeding, and yeah.
I love heavy brakes. Make them heavy already. It's
You don't have to do that. They don't have to be heavy, but
No, I'm not talking like kilograms.
Are these heavy?
I mean, exactly.
The
I
rotors
haven't
have
even
to
thought
be.
of it. Like, because like same with the Mavens, you're like, okay, they're like a little heavier,
Yeah,
but
but
I
it's
don't.
in the
But why not
context of
make
your
them-
bikes. It's
yeah.
the difference between like having mud on the down tube or not. And
Right.
you get brakes.
I
that
just
work.
want everything. I want them to be light with the same power.
I don't care.
don't care.
Yeah.
And also
I
these,
think I wrote
That's
this
why
up
you're on
when
a
I did.
42-pound bike.
No.
though.
When I did my Mavens on the XC bike thing, it was like, I forget the numbers, but it was like really not that big of a difference gram wise between
Like a half
levels
pound,
and
I think.
Mavens.
It's like half pound.
No way.
Yeah,
but it's sometimes
200
it's like,
grams?
that's a half pound.
I know, but it isn't that much.
It's 73 between the codes and the.
But exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Half a
So he's got
pound.
the numbers.
But then you
add
get a
on the
bike
other
that
things. You add your
stops.
240 dropper post, and this
No,
is a
but I
debate
didn't
for
do
another
that.
time.
Yeah.
Anyway, the Gustavs are a bit heavier than the MT7s.
Yeah.
You rode them.
Yes. I basically, so I was at this press camp and I was like, how can I torture test these brakes? And me riding is normally quite a high threshold, but even that wasn't, even that brake dragging extravaganza wasn't enough. So I put this e-bike, because we're doing bike park e-bike laps because we're in Europe.
As you do.
As you do.
And yeah, and so I basically rode down this 6 kilometer, something like that, tarmac road in turbo with the rear brake jammed on and got this disc glowing red. Like, it was literally like, like the photos, it was red.
Like in Formula One.
Like in Formula One. Yeah, carbon dust is
I'm
going
just like car.
Yeah, it was quite amazing. And then got to the bottom, rode, to was off the brakes, let it cool down, and then just carried on riding, and it was fine. Like, absolutely fine. It took probably one braking incident for then it to completely go firm again. The first one, the pads maybe had to sort of rebed in almost to kind of realign.
Yep.
Yeah, I thought this was great. I also loved it because you don't have to, the rotor's so thick that you don't have to align the pistons. because it was
it'll
thick
do it
enough to
itself.
push it
Yeah,
to
yeah.
send
Right.
back.
Yeah.
So
Bring on 3
consistent.
mil rotors. Bring on 3 mil. Love it. I thought it was super cool product. And the last we have the O-Chain R. How is this different? I mean, is anyone still listening at this point?
If you're there, you get a reward.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is
Holy
yet.
moly.
but
Digging
we'll-
in. Yeah, you take it in shifts. You
But, yeah,
listen
you've
to
got the
a
big
little bit
one
here, a
next.
little bit there.
They're waiting for the good ones, like the
I mean, this is the hard-hitting stuff, man. O-Chain R is an adjustable version of the original O-Chain. It has 4 positions of degree slop, if you will, from like, you know, how much it'll allow the drivetrain to cycle. And you can also lock it out if you want to feel the difference.
Yeah, or just for like a
It's-
long paved climb or something. If you end up stuck somewhere, you didn't want that. Like I do it sometimes. Like usually I leave it in the middle settings, but like
You're a piece of work, Cass.
why not? It's
You're a
there.
real piece of
Why
work.
would I
Raise
want
my
my bike
seat.
to be
I
all mushy?
gotta
gotta-
walk out
yeah.
my chainring.
Yeah, it's just a dial though.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're right.
It's externally adjustable.
And compared to like,
That's the
I'd rather
big-
have a locked out O-chain than a locked out
Could
suspension.
you have a bit on a bit of string or something and just...
I bet you could just right behind you, like
Just
so
electronic.
I'll run my belt down to the O-chain, and I could just like
as you stick over to your saddle.
yeah. I'll just tie it to my dropper post, and when the dropper post goes up, it locks it out.
That
That would be all right, huh? Yeah, we're getting there. But when the O-chain is on and not locked out, it works really well. It's definitely a nice like calm underfoot sensation. It deals with that chain slap in a good way, and yeah, I like how it
The
feels.
R also seems to be more durable than the original. If you know, like I think creaking and like rebuild frequency was a little higher with those original ones, and this I've had one on for the entire summer and haven't had to do anything.
And the R is for rugged.
Rugged.
Is that what it is?
I have no idea.
No, I think it's for like radical or race or
Yeah.
I thought a real
Robust.
sort of shining endorsement that I'm sure O-Chain were absolutely stoked on is that Shimano are making spiderless Saint cranks. Like Shimano being Shimano, like, don't get me wrong, they make some great stuff, but they seem to be not always the most flexible when it comes to sort of small demands. But the fact they're making so Syndicate could run the O-Chain, I was like, that means they're in. Cool. Well, the winner of product of the year is the Schwobbly Bobblies, the radial tires. This is something we've spoken about before.
Yeah.
The
The technology is impressive, and then the tires themselves are very impressive and worth trying. If people are on the fence,
Yeah.
I'd highly recommend them.
yeah, I think whatever like confusion or skepticism there is around maybe the different pressures you'll be running, it's worth experimenting with and realizing that it's not as drastic a shift as you'd expect. I think maybe Schwalbe did kind of a disservice in them being like, Amaury Piron ran 32 PSI on this mud race. And like, that's cool. And they do work at higher pressures, but that's not like the experience that the rest of us had necessarily. Like you do run a couple PSI higher, but then what's more impressive is just like the difference in how they perform.
But also look in the mirror and say, are you Amaury Piron?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, like 3 to 5 psi higher, and then they work great,
Yeah.
and then you still get all those benefits.
They also are the easiest thing to shroud in the most
you
confidence
can.
inspiring way.
If you're on your normal pressures, especially, then you can get the
but they're
pressure
just
pleats
so
looking for.
consistent.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you feel like a god.
Yeah.
Cool.
And now what you've all been waiting for / skipping forward to,
Yeah, and editor seats.
mountain bike of the year. So the nominations are the Specialized Epic. There seem to be like 17 different epics. We'll explain which one we mean. The Canyon Spectral, the Giant Trans X, the Santa Cruz Bronson, the Santa Cruz V10, the Specialized Stump Jumper, the Trek Top Fuel, and the Pivot Phoenix. Sweet
That's a lot.
baby Jesus, this
That's
is
a
a lot of
list.
bikes.
Damn.
Yeah.
Lot of
Max is
good
looking
bikes.
at me concerned, saying we've got 23 minutes on this card. We're going to do it, folks. So, which epic is it? Why
8.
the 8? And it's not the one that isn't a hardtail, but could be a hardtail.
Yeah, it's
No,
Epic World
okay,
Cup.
so yeah, Epic World Cup is a hardtail with a shock. Which is I don't care. I know that's overly simplistic. We're gonna leave it like that. The Epic 8 is the XC bike. The Epic Evo is the XC bike with a longer fork.
Okay, and this is the
That's
epic.
it. The Epic 8 is the XC bike. That's the one I reviewed.
Yeah,
And you
120,
liked it.
120.
120, 120. Surprisingly great geo. It's light. It's awesome. Love that bike
So, is it a World Cup XC bike
for sure.
that just so happens to be a shit ton of fun?
Yeah, I think so. Well, they did a good job of balancing those prerogatives. You know, like any XC bike that's going to be raced has to be a good race bike. But I think Specialized knows that a lot of people who are going to buy this bike want to just go for a bike ride. And it's good at that too.
Is this what World Cup races would be racing though?
Sometimes. I think a lot of their team does race that World Cup hardtaily thing just because it's shorter travel. It's a bit more efficient. It's more traditional in many ways, but the Epic 8 is like well-rounded for a lot of modern courses.
Yeah, it was raced this year for sure. Like
For sure.
Gretzky.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's not, but
Yeah.
it's just like they are
They have a
balancing
choice.
different models.
So it's kind of like in the years past, you would have your hardtail and your full suspension bike. Now you have your hardtail-ish thing and your full suspension bike. So yeah.
Your midtail.
Yeah, your midtail.
It feels like there was a time where it was almost concerned if we brought progressive geometry to cross-country bikes, it would undermine the charm of the thing. But this still stays
still feels really efficient, still feels fast.
Okay.
Like I didn't, like I had it for a while, eventually had to send it back, but like spent a lot of time trying to break it, not like physically break the bike, but like break it out of the XC mold, and it does a really good job of staying that way.
I'm just imagining you waterboarding a bike.
no, like it no matter what, like it is still fundamentally a cross-country bike. It feels like precise and sharp
And
but
rewarding.
and like all I wanted to do is pedal it hard, but it also has like a bit more of a buffer thanks to that geometry.
Okay, well, speaking of another bike, it probably isn't too dissimilar in terms of, in some ways, a bit more very much more trail focused, but seemingly giving a lot of things to a lot of different people. The Canyon Spectral. This is a bike we all rode in this year's field test.
And we all loved
This thing, Matt. What the heck was how was this bike so much good?
so much good.
So much good. It was
great.
It felt like a mixed wheel bike that happened to be 29. It felt like a really well damped short travel bike, and it was just so rewarding to ride.
Yep. I think rewarding, like what you put into it, was the best way to sum this up. Is like it was comfortable enough that you could point it down some rocky stuff, but the more you worked the bike, the better it performed, and the more excited you were to ride it more, like ride it harder. And it didn't really have any major downsides. Like it had limitations in terms of travel compared to some of the other longer travel bikes in that test, but it definitely gave it a good run and gave the other ones a good run for their money.
Yeah, I guess we should mention the couple little quirky bits. There is that KISS system that we ended up taking out. Like it comes with that, which is kind of a funny. I wouldn't be surprised, or hopefully in the future they just don't include that anymore. It's not necessary, but it is a little weird little gadget. And so that's
Not
the one
necessary is such a kind way to put it.
Yeah, I will.
Not necessary.
Yeah,
It's not necessary.
no, it's not. I get it. Like the bike is very, very, very good without it. So you put it on, it doesn't improve it. So there's that. But yeah, as far as like the whole package goes, it's just a great bike. It's like a mountain bike. You can just do whatever on it, and
But also, it should be worth commenting. Here, we're nominating the bike. There's also been, as we record this, there's an article on the homepage talking about some issues Canyon are having in terms of their customer support.
yeah, their e-bike. There's currently like an e-bike battery recall type thing, and there's some a little bit of like I don't know, internet murmurs or fire about customer service. There's some frustration there, but luckily this bike doesn't have a battery, so we don't have to deal with that. But there is, we do need to mention it is a consumer direct brand, so it's not like you can just go to your local bike shop. Although they do have a new partnership with REI, so in the States you can go to your shop or to go to REI and have some of that type sorted.
We're
for
reviewing
like
the bike.
warranty
Yeah,
support.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, we do need to be clear.
We
We're
don't
reviewing.
we don't review the service or the warranty process.
There's things to keep in
unless
mind
that
for sure,
happens,
but like the bike itself, we've ridden it hard. It's been working great, and like how it works is excellent. So
also,
that's what
you
they're
can
reviewing.
take a bicycle to a bike shop and they will fix it if you have issues. So.
Wow.
Crazy
thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I think it knocked all our socks off at field test.
Like it was. I was so impressed, and I was like surprised that I was that impressed by it. 'Cause
Me
it
too.
looks extra regular on paper. Like it's just. I've seen that before, but I think they took the lessons learned from their other. There's been so many versions of the Spectral, but they like mushed it into one really,
same
really
as
good
the
one.
Epic. It's like the Spectral is this like cloud of models, or historically has been, but whatever this one is, it's sick.
Yeah.
It's really good.
The first time I rode it was on that shootout thing, and I was just like, good.
Yeah.
I'll take one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next, we're actually onto a bike that I reviewed earlier in the year, the Giant Trans X. I remember, so for full disclosure, typically don't really like trail bikes that much. And when you said, I remember you said, "Henry, can you review this?" I was like, trail. Oh, God.
It's a rough life Henry has. It's so hard. It's so hard.
Yeah, fair. But when it felt sharp. It was 29er 140mm bike. It was actually £30.
Yeah.
It was light. It was sharp. It was, you could push it so hard. Had a great blend through the suspension of all the sort of the hallmarks or cliches that we talk about. And it really felt like that was the system. So that was the platform that Maestro really thrived in. That mid-travel.
Yeah, travel bracket's good for it.
Yeah. And it just thought it had great features, thought it looked great. Yeah, I mean, you know, everything. I was absolutely stoked on it. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Yeah,
it's almost like a little bit of a sleeper, just because
Yeah.
I think Giant ends up, they're such a large company and they have so many models, and you kind of can like almost forget that they exist, not as a company, but like you forget which model is which. There's a little bit of confusion with the names and things. There's like X Advanced, Limited, but you know, it's like, it's hard. But then this one, you get one, you're like, oh, that's really good.
Yeah. I mean, it's a bit like, you know, we were actually talking about this morning, but like the small hatchback that happens to have tuner brake. You know, it's like, well, actually, this really, easy to live with, easy to really be really rewarding. Onto another bike, the first of 2 Santa Cruzes this year, for nominated for Bike of the Year, the Santa Cruz Bronson. This is a bike that you 3 loved. Am I right in saying?
I liked it a lot.
You liked it a lot. Let's talk us through it, Dario.
It is quite good. No, I think Mike should talk about it.
Haven't
He loved it the most.
You've got one.
I do have one as my one of my personal bikes now. Yeah, because it's in Bellingham. It's a really good bike. We had the debate of whether it's a trail bike. It's not a trail bike, obviously. It's an all mountain bike. Because we're going to say that officially. It's an all mountain bike, and
Or
it's
a
like,
small enduro bike, or a
a small enduro bike makes you think it's small, like tiny. You know? Or you could call it the mini Nomad. I think Matt called it the mini Nomad, but it's a 150, 160 bike. It is that kind of like do it all, as long as your all has a lot of good kind of gnarly descents and aggressive things. Really well constructed frame. It has that quality that Santa Cruz is known for. It just kind of does a little bit of everything really well. And I think these days you can almost split categories down by the fork that's on them. So what, pick your favorite brand, whether it's, if you go by RockShox or Fox, but you can have like a 36 bike or a 38 bike or a Lyric bike or a Zeb bike. And this is a great Lyric 36 bike, which just kind of like feels like it's for that.
And for the record, the only reason that maybe I wasn't so on board is because I think it was a really good bike. I just felt that it was almost, we talked about it before, but not rewarding enough, because it was almost too capable for this stuff. But I think if you wanted something, if you were a rider, which I'm definitely not, of a flowy, I believe the word is jib, a jib style rider,
Jib Lord.
a jib lord, you're going to have way more fun. Well, I'm more maybe, I just want something to, a bit sharper perhaps.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, like those, like I said, in Bellingham or somewhere where it has like those like flowy, nice jumpy trails, but then you can get on the rough stuff and still be really happy. So I think that's why it appeals to me.
Well, you called the mini Mega Tower. I actually refer to that bike as a mini V10, which is very apt because onto the V10. This ended up in the field test as a late edition, but it was interesting because we'd actually already recorded the podcast. And the funny thing is, it's the bike you had for long-term review. It's a bike that I knew the previous version very, very well. And the way we kind of described it was not necessarily the standout with any one characteristic, but the second best at pretty much everything.
Yeah.
And as an overall package for a downhill bike, it's kind of got it all, hey, Matt?
It does. Yeah, it definitely suits someone who wants to race, someone who just wants to ride park and not care about the time. But it's also capable enough if you're just like free riding too and you want a snappy bike.
Are you changing things between all those?
I was going to say because of the multiple geometry adjustments and the sizing. Yeah, this thing can do it all. It's a downhill all-arounder really is what it is.
It feels like, not necessarily an all-out powder ski, but something that can do, it's happy just doing all over the resort into the mountain. Yeah.
It's like an all-mountain downhill bike.
All mountain. That's what it sounds. Honestly, it sounds so daft.
But it's nice what you want, because you don't. I mean, if you only have a downhill bike, it's already a specialty item. If it only does downhill racing, you're kind of sad if you want to go like hit some A-line dirt merchant laps. But
well, that's what I think. I mean, I think there were some of those bikes in the field tests that were great race bikes or great park bikes. But it sounds so stupid, but you wouldn't necessarily be like, if you got a downhill bike and then you think your enduro bike's more fun to ride in the bike park, something's gone a bit wrong. And so absolutely kudos to the V10 for that one. Next, we're on to the Specialized Stump Jumper. You've got some great stumps to jump in Bellingham, I believe. Some of the finest.
A lot of good stumps
recently,
to jump.
with the amount of clear cutting, we're up to like good level stumps. It's like just big old stumps. Stump.
Is this bike more than just a shock?
Yeah, for sure. It's got good geo, and like nice accoutrement of like adjustment and storage and like construction quality. I think to me that's why I argued for it on this list. It's like the shock is a cool thing. It achieves certain properties that some people will really like, but more than that, it's just like a good all-rounder bike.
In some ways, is this not a nod to the previous version as well? Because they're not totally.
More than a nod, it's like a very
Yeah.
long, loving hug.
Yeah,
You know,
it builds
like,
on
it's
that
very
stump jumper
similar.
Evo, like the old stump jumper. There used to be a stumpy Evo and then the regular stump jumper. Regular stump jumper had flex days. I know.
Yeah.
There's only so many names to go around. There's a limit of names.
Just honestly.
Yeah, and there was like, so they had their 130 bike and their 150 bike, and then they mushed them together and they made this. So this is another mush
Principally the
bike,
same as the prior
Stump
150
Evo,
bike.
which we called it like the Golden Retriever, I think.
Yeah, and this feels that
It's
way
like
too.
That nice,
Like,
your mountain bike for doing a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just going to rattle through them because we've got the Trek Top Fuel, another bike that sort of, in its kindest way, was an evolution of a great platform. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of moving more into that shorter travel trail bike thing. It's definitely not a cross country bike anymore, but it is in the short travel trail bike. It's, under 30 pounds. It pedals really well, super adjustable. You can make it a wide range of things compared to before. So yeah, just good solid bike.
I thought the Trek Top Fuel, the last generation, and similar enough with the Slash and the Fuel, Trek got rad. And this was one of the bikes that I think, 5 years ago, to be honest, they weren't necessarily a brand that I thought was doing really sort of like cool bikes that I'd be really stoked on riding. But now it seems they've changed somehow and they're making some really great stuff. On to the final nominee, the Pivot Phoenix. Was this the bike you expected it to be after all that prototyping in the wild, Matt?
I don't know if I had any expectations for this thing, to be honest.
Talk about too many, could be in dangerous territory for Pivot there with head tube expectations.
it exceeded expectations wonderfully in that camp.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll leave that one at that. Downhill performance on this bike is exceptional.
Cool.
It is a high pivot with 2 chains. It's very quiet. It's very light. I would say the biggest difference with this bike is that with that high pivot or mid-high pivot, I should say, it doesn't feel sluggish. It's actually quite energetic. And at the same time, because it is quite easy to move around and turn and change direction on, it doesn't, also doesn't take away from its true downhill capacity either.
I think balanced those two.
Yeah, it
well.
definitely has a unique feel to it, which I'll get into in a full review. But it's definitely also different enough from other bikes out there that you're like, wow, this is a special bike.
Well, one bike I'd like you to just maybe quickly service, if you could, would be a bike that shares the DW6 with, the Atherton downhill bike.
Yeah, okay.
Do they have a similar feel? Or is it a bit more complicated than that?
I would say they are quite a bit different in terms of geometry. The pivot.
In terms of the suspension feel, is it?
Suspension feel as well. Yes, the pivot is a lot more progressive, even in the more linear setting. It does have, I would say, even more of a supple breakaway, although the Atherton was really good at that. This one just feels totally disconnected because of those 2 chains. Yeah, it definitely feels like a high pivot, but doesn't, just kind of has that isolated chain feeling.
It is actually I think it's quite an elegant solution.
Oh, big time.
Just you kind of get everything you want, and if weight's not so much of a factor, which shouldn't be anyway on your brakes. Thank you
not
very much,
down.
Kaz.
It's light.
But that's the other thing is it's a really light bike.
It is,
yeah.
Much lighter than the prototype. They knocked a couple pounds off.
You said it was pretty quiet too. Like the chains look complicated, but it's been pretty quiet.
Yeah, it's been solid. Bolt check after the first ride, and we're good to go.
Sweet.
Cool. Well, I think unless we've got any final last things to say,
objections?
or forever hold your peace before we reveal the mountain bike of the year winner.
And we listed half of the bikes that came out this year.
There's even more. If you go to the awards article on the homepage, there are some honorable mentions, but we'll save those.
Yeah.
You can read about those.
Oh,
but
totally. And the winner of this year's mountain bike of the year is the Canyon Spectral. We've just reeled off a whole list of desirable bikes that are very much at the forefront of what mountain biking is, but there was something about the Spectral that seemed to have a lot of character.
Yeah.
which is such a bullshit term. But you know what I mean?
But like I think, and we need to clarify that like it is our favorite bike that we rode over the course of the year, and it doesn't have to have a novel high pivot system or some crazy construction. Those things can definitely help to get a bike in this category, but like the bike that wins is the one that impresses us the most, the one that we want to ride, and then we would recommend other people try out to ride. So that's the Spectral is just like, this bike is sweet. You should ride it and try it.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's funny that we have all these bikes in here with interesting concepts, shocks, high pivots, suspension, whatever, and then we pick maybe one of the most regular looking acting bikes there is, and
it's a testament though.
Yeah,
like, it just does a really good job with what it has, and it doesn't strive for anything too.
Was that pun?
No, I hate that. Nice. Scrub that. No, I don't want that. Was completely unintentional.
I'm trying to think of the other ones. They do a lot.
It was just a neuron misfire.
Well done.
It is a real. I mean, it sounds a bit. Pinpointing one particular thing, but the shock tune on that bike. Sweet. I'm just getting hot under the collar just thinking about it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was amazing and a real probably tonic to some of the complaints we had about some of the other bikes in that year's field test. It was just like.
Also, it has almost no adjustment. It's got a wheel size flip chip.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Doesn't have Geo.
Does it? No.
Yeah, it's high low on the.
I thought that was just for the wheel size.
No, the high that's different.
Oh shit, my bad.
But still, it's still pretty.
Okay.
Like,
anyway, like it feels like just
a
of the fleet of many bikes we had in the field test and in this list here, it's like fairly cut and dry. You can just like roll it out and go for a bike ride. I think that's very much its like purview. It's just go ride your bike.
Yeah,
and
the value
it does that super well.
Yeah, we don't. The value doesn't play as much into these ones for bike of the year because we want kind of overall, but it is a good value also. So you kind of get. Yeah, it rides great and it doesn't cost a crazy amount of money.
It looks great.
Yeah, it looks
good parts. Yeah. Ticked all the boxes.
Yeah. So great job to all the nominees, but a special kudos to that Canyon because it was a bike that we all came back and said, "Oh my god, that's really great."
Yeah,
like,
and it's worth reinforcing too that like we all came to the conclusion of it being our top choice. Independent of each other, like quietly and discreetly, we all were like, "Oh, this is really good," and like tried to get the others to feel the same, and we just didn't get any of them to quite hit the same.
And it's
marks.
not even like, and I think there will be some people complain about recency bias because we did ride this pretty recently in the field test, just a couple months ago. But I rode it even earlier. I rode it in February, like when it initially launched, and I was like, "Oh, this is good." At the time, I wasn't thinking like bike of the year, but I was like, "This is a really good bike. I'm excited to ride more." So,
but when we did come around to, I love nothing more than arguing with you guys.
It is a good time.
I love it. It makes me so happy. The mountain bike of the year, I think, was probably the most sewn up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it was. It was not even really a.
Yeah, it was like
it felt obvious.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, a hearty congratulations. I'm sure there'll be the bratwurst will be flowing tonight. Thank you very much for making it through this marathon podcast. You can get one of those little badges you can sew onto your swimming kit. Use Pinkbike Survivor. And thank you for just a year of sticking with us through podcasts, through videos, through our endless articles. And we hope you have a very nice time riding your bike in the very near future.